Hey everyone, today we're going to be covering the next page of our notes packet. We're looking at the page that says congruent triangles. Okay, so we know that congruent means that equal. So in geometry, what we're looking at specifically, congruent triangles will have the same shape and size. So obviously if they're both triangles, they're already both the same shape. So size would be like the length of the sides or maybe like the measure of the angles. So that's what goes in these blanks here. Angles and sides are congruent. Okay, so congruent statements. When you're saying that two triangles are congruent, you have to be very specific with the order of the letters. So for example, look at these two triangles here. If you look at angle A, that one only has that one little tick mark, right? So when you look at the other triangle, see how D only has one little tick mark? So in the congruency statements, A and D are both the first letter. And then it should go in order. So you see how B is the second letter and E is the second letter. So when you look at those triangles, B has two rings and E also has two rings. And then last, C and F are the last letters. So C has three rings and F has three rings. So you have to make sure that you put it in order. So the way that I color coded mine, if I wrote this orange, blue, green, then I need to keep writing it orange, blue, green. Okay, so the title of this video is CPCTC. So what even is that? What it stands for, it's an acronym, is that corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so if I say that this whole triangle is congruent to this whole triangle, that means that all its parts are congruent. A is congruent to D. The side AB is congruent to the side DE. So all the parts are congruent as well. Okay, so for these first two examples here, it says to list all the congruent angles and sides given the congruency statements. So I don't have a picture to look at, they're just giving me the statements. So let's start with the angles. And again, this is just going to go in the order that they gave us. So since J is the first letter and P is the first letter, when I write my congruency statement, I'm going to have angle J is congruent to angle P. And then we're going to do that all the way down. K is the second letter, Q is the second letter. So angle K is congruent to angle Q. And last, angle L is congruent to angle R. Okay, then when it comes for the sides, sides are two letters at a time. So go in order of two letters. So JK is the first two, PQ is the first two. So that must mean that side JK is congruent to side PQ. Okay, then the second two letters, I have KL and QR. And then last, you kind of have to make the loop all the way around. So it would be the first and the last letter. The first and the last letter. So JL is congruent to PR. Okay, then it says write another valid congruency statement. So I did JKL is congruent to PQR. We could have used another arrangement. We can start with the letter K, but make sure that you actually have everything lined up with the other triangle. So say that first triangle, JKL, if I were to rename it KLJ, so I'm just shifting everything down one letter. So KLJ. when I say it's congruent to that other triangle, PQR, I need to write the letters in the correct order. Well, K is congruent to Q, so Q needs to be the first letter I write. L is congruent to R, so that'll be the second letter. And then J is congruent to P. So there's going to be more than one way to write it. This is just the first one that I came up with. Okay, let's do another one of those. Triangle WXY is congruent to EFG. So let's do these angles first. Angle W is congruent to angle E. Angle X is congruent to angle F. And angle Y is congruent to angle G. I just made sure I went in the correct order. First goes with first, second goes with second, third goes with third. Okay, now the sides, you're going to do 2 letters at a time. So first 2 letters, WX is congruent to EF. Second 2 letters, XY is congruent to FG. And then we have to circle around. So now I can do YW or WY is congruent to EG. Okay, so then now let's write another congruency statement for this. So what if WXY, what if I said it backwards? So I said YXW. That means for the other one, I also have to say it backwards. So triangle GFE. Okay, now for part 3, they actually give us the triangles, but notice how there's no markings or anything. So we're gonna have to go based off of that congruency statement that they gave us. Triangle KPM is congruent to AYC. So complete each of the following statements. So before I start filling in the statements, I think we should look at that picture. And let's do some markings so that we can have everything straight. Okay, so K is the first letter and A is the first letter. That means that K, so I'm going to put 1 ring, has to be congruent to A. Then P is in the middle, Y is in the middle. Those have to be congruent. So I'm going to do 2 rings for those. And then M is last and C is last. So those must be congruent. I'm going to do 3 rings. Okay, and then when it comes for the sides, just pay attention to which angles you're connecting. So on KPM, K has 1 ring and P has 2 rings. So I can say that this side is congruent to 1 ring, 2 rings. So that side here. Or you could use the colors that I'm using. So I have blue and green. Here's blue and green. So those 2 sides have to also be congruent. So I'm going to do 2 tick marks. And then there's only 1 side left. So 3 tick marks, 3 tick marks. So now that I have everything all marked up, it should be easy to fill in these statements. So here we have KM. So I'm going to find KM. That's the one that has 3. So over here, the one that has 3 is AC. CY has 2 markings. So find the other one that also has 2 markings. So CY is going to be congruent to MP. PK has 1 mark. So it has to be congruent to YA. Okay, now we have some angles. Angle Y is congruent to angle P. Angle K is congruent to angle A. Angle ACY, so see how they set up the letters, ACY. So they want this green one, so for us it's going to be M. But since they use 3 letters, let's also use 3 letters. So ACY, they went from 1 ring, 3 rings, 2 rings. So we need to do the same thing. 1 ring, 3 rings, 2 rings. So KMP. Okay, and then triangle MPK. So they're just getting this and they're rearranging it. So MPK, So I went 3, 2, 1 for the rings, would be CYA. And then YAC, so now they're starting here, YAC, 2 rings, 1 ring, 3 rings. Let's go in that same order, would be PKM. Okay, let's look at the next page. So it's going to be more of that stuff, but now they want us to actually find measurements. So let's start with number 4. So again, they give us our congruency statement. I think it's going to be easier if we fill in our figures first, and then we can fill in the blanks. Okay, so let's start with S is congruent to B. So here's S and here's B. And since they're congruent, S is already marked 67, so that means that B also has to be 67. So that's actually one of our blanks, so I'm going to do that. Okay. Next thing is T is in the middle and F is in the middle. So those are going to be congruent. So T, I'm going to put 2 rings, is congruent to F. Neither one of those has a measure yet, so we're going to have to skip it for now. And then W and N are both the last letters, so those are going to be congruent, W and N. And since N is 82, then W also is 82. So that is one of the angles they want us to find. Okay, so angle F. So T and F, we don't have those angles yet, but they're pretty easy to find because we know that triangles are 180. So we're going to do 180 minus the 2 angles we already have, 67 plus 82. And that gives us, so that's 149. So 180 minus 149 is 31. So that leaves 31 left over for these angles right here. Okay, now let's look at the sides. Okay, so for the sides, let's start with ST since that's the first 2 letters, and BF. So ST and BF. So ST is 17, therefore BF also has to be 17. Then the second 2 letters, TW and FN. TW and FN. So I'm going to put 2 tick marks and 2 tick marks. FN is 14, so TW needs to also be 14. And then you can tell there's only one side left, so I'm going to put 3 tick marks, and they have to be 9. Okay, so now going to those blanks, BN is right here, so that's 9. TW is 14, and BF is 17. Okay, because there are a lot of examples, I do want to skip around a little bit. So let's skip number 5 and let's go to, let's go to number 6. So this time they're wanting us to find the values of X, Y, and Z, but the only hint that they give us is that those 2 triangles are congruent. But we're going to use that congruency statement to help us. So say the first 2 letters, UV. That side has to be congruent to the first 2 letters here, TS. So UV has to be congruent to TS. So you see what they're labeled as? They're congruent, so we would set those equal. 12x minus 7 equals 53. Add 7 to both sides. So 12x equals 60. And then divide by 12. X equals 5. Okay, so we have one of our letters. Okay, now let's look at the next thing. VW, the second 2 letters. SR, the second two letters. So VW and SR. So that's here and here. So again, look at what they are labeled as. 57 and 5y minus 33. They need to be equal. So 57 equals 5y minus 33. Let's add 33 to both sides. That gives us 90 equals 5y. Then divide by 5. 18 equals y. Okay, and then last, when you look at the first letter and the last letter, so UW, and then first letter, last letter, TR. And then when I look at those labels, 3z plus 14 equals 50. Okay, let's subtract 14 from both sides. So now I have 3z equals 36. Then we divide by 3. So z equals 12. Okay, 7 is very similar. It's just this time they're looking at the angles. So just make sure you write the correct angles equal to each other. I want to do number 8 because I do want to do one of the ones where there's no picture. You're going to have to look at the letters. So again, congruency statement helps a lot. DEF is congruent to JKL. So if I do first two letters, DE, and first two letters, JK, they need to be congruent. So DE and JK. So looking at those statements, here's DE, and then JK is way over here. Those are congruent. So let's write those as equal to each other. 18 equals 3y minus 21. And we're going to solve like we did with the other ones. Let's add 21 to both sides. 39 equals 3y. Divide by 3. So 13 equals y. Okay, back to the congruency statement. The last two letters, EF, and the last two letters, KL. So EF and KL. EF. I don't have a KL, so that one's not going to do anything. Okay, and then let's keep going. The first letter and the last letter. So DF, first letter and last letter, JL. So DF and JL. Here's DF, and then JL's right next to it. So that's how we're going to solve for x. 9x minus 23 equals 7x minus 11. So this one's a little bit more steps, but it's still pretty fast. Let's get those x's all on one side. So 2x minus 23 equals negative 11. Add 23. So now I have 2x equals 12. And then last, let's divide by 2. So x equals 6. So it's all about organizing the letters of the order is important. So make sure you're matching up corresponding parts. Okay, and then that's it for today's video. Make sure that this is all written in your blue packet. And tomorrow you will have an assignment going over all of this.